We've been talking a lot about the brackets and college basketball, but hey, what about recruiting on the football side of things in the SEC? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome to Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later in the episode. I want to talk some SEC recruiting, so nobody better than to bring in than our Locked On recruiting insider. He is Brian Smith. You can follow him, of course, with the Locked On the portal. Been doing a great job covering everything from recruiting, the transfer portal, and all this. And Brian, welcome in, man. How are you? It's crazy. We're in the middle of March Madness and the tournament going on. And did I see this in basketball at the tournament? Like the portal's closing in basketball, that like the kids still alive in the tournament have to put their names into the portal. Is that what I was reading?
If that's the case, somebody's getting sued. I can answer how that's going to end. I don't know.
Yeah. I thought I saw like one of the kids that's still playing, like he's puts his name into the portal because it was the deadline to put your name in the portal. So
football's got a lot of problems, but at least they give the teams in the tournament a chance to get a 5-day window after. What are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's the Bo Perbula thing, right? At Penn State, they're prepping for a playoff game, and he's like, well, I'm in the portal. I'm going somewhere else. So it is wild, crazy times. But we've had a lot of commitments in the last week in the SEC, so I figured, let's get you on to kind of hit on some of these and hit on some of the schools and some of the movement. And nobody's had more movement here in the last week than let's start with LSU. My goodness, the biggest name they add to their class where – put them clearly in the top 5 on most of the recruiting rankings websites. Tristen Keys out of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, the number 1 wide receiver for the class of 2026. What do we know about Tristen Keys? And, man, the legacy of LSU and great wide receivers just continues on here.
Tristen Keys is considered by many to be the number 1 receiver in the class, and I can see why. 6'3", about 180 pounds, incredibly long wingspan. And he's a kid that just competes at everything he does, whether it's going for a go ball or running a screen, blocking. He's all around. And this is all you really need to know about his competitiveness, Chris. He played in the bowl game out in Hawaii. The next day, he had an opportunity to play in a 7-on-7 tournament. But here's the deal. It was in South Florida. He flew 13 hours to go play one day of 7-on-7. That is not your normal guy. That is somebody that loves to. I was like, what? Tristan's here? John Garcia from Rivals, and I walked up to him. We were interviewing him, and you could tell he was punch drunk, like from an overnight flight. And he did the interview, was great. And I'm like, this is not your normal guy. So every school in the country has offered him. He's at a really good program in Hattiesburg, and he's earned all his accolades. I was a little surprised that he pulled the trigger, but he did go and visit Ole Miss right after too. So I don't think this is done deal. But right now, LSU has him in their commitment fold, and just a tremendous player.
Yeah, the interesting part, too, is, they've had Kenny Darby, I think, committed back in the fall. So they've had him in this class. He's a Louisiana kid. But to get Tristen Keys, and then just a couple of days later, from right in their backyard in Destrehan, Jabari Mack, who, by the way, if you are familiar with Destrehan High, one Justin Jefferson came out of, who's, last time I checked, he's doing something with the Minnesota Vikings. I don't know, one of the leading receivers in the NFL currently, but Jabari Mack, I mean, some kids would go, oh, the number 1 wide receiver just committed to that school, I'm going to go somewhere else. Jabari Mack goes, no, I'm going to go to LSU too. And it seems like LSU's had these duos, right? You had Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. You had Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. Yeah, I mean, they've always had kind of these pairs, Malik Neighbors, with Brian Thomas Jr. Like the pairs have always kind of been a thing with LSU. It
is amazing. And by the way, I think Destrehan's where the Honey Badger's from too. But this is a really
St. Aug. He was St. Aug, right? New Orleans.
Was it? Maybe that's another one that they.
It was Leonard Fournette and Tyrann Mathieu from there. Yeah.
But they've always done their best job when they stay in state and get kids, and give Brian Kelly credit. One thing going, like Tristen Keys 5-star, you go get him. Jabari Mack, I saw him at New Orleans, Under Armour, and he just kicked the crap out of everybody. He is a go ball guy. He's a short route guy. He's strong. He looks like he's a professional boxer. He's just put together, and he's from Destrehan. Great program. I think this is the kind of kid that can come in and play early because physically he's ready and he's been trained right. That's a really good program, so that helps, but he takes his craft serious. And your point is interesting. Getting not one, but two guys that are national receiver recruits within a couple of days, even for LSU, that is that is rarefied air. So here's the funny part. You and I were talking about this off air. They don't even have a quarterback committed yet.
Right.
All these receivers to pop. I think they're at 4, depending on how they want to use these plays. Like Matt could play free safety if you wanted him to. He could play running back if you wanted him to, but he's a receiver. They are just killing it on the recruiting trail right now.
Yeah, and by the way, I think I saw they're getting a visit from Calvin Russell from Florida. I think from the Miami area.
Northwestern. Yeah.
I mean that's just another freak athlete that could be added to that receiving corps too. But it is funny. I guess maybe they're giving LSU the benefit of the doubt with quarterback on. Wow, their track record in recent years has been pretty good with the quarterback. So we'll figure that part out after. I don't want to spend a ton of time on LSU, but just one more on them. I saw they also got a 4-star DB named Dylan Purter from the state of Alabama.
Yeah, he lives not that far from where I do. He's at Booker T. Washington. This is a kid that can really run. He just needs to add some weight. Probably going to play safety at LSU, but a kid that can track the ball and go and get it. So they've had a track record with DBs, obviously, as well. At one point, you would have said, no doubt, this is DBU. LSU pulls them in, man. They get the kids from the South all over the place. So, yes, they're hitting home with the Louisiana kids, but they'll find a few guys from around the South as well.
Yeah, I should say one website had him listed as a corner, but I'm looking 24/7 has him listed as a safety. So good call on that one. Let's switch gears, head out west to Texas A&M as they just picked up a commitment a couple days ago. 4-star running back Jonathan Hatton was originally an Oklahoma commit, decommitted, but just committed to Mike Elko and the Aggies. He's from the state of Texas, and I mean, look, at least sample size from Mike Elko in his time at A&M, they're going to run the football. So running backs eyeing A&M, probably a good idea for this young man.
He fits the profile of what Elko's looking for. He's over 200 pounds already. He's about 6'1", and he can actually make cuts and move around in a way that you would think of as a smaller back. But when he hits the crease, if you miss a run gap fit or he beats a block or beats a tackle, not many guys are going to catch him either. He's a national recruit. He'll probably play early. I'm not saying like Le'Veon Moss went in there, did really well, and it's a shame he got beat up a little bit. But this kid's kind of similar to that, where he can be your bell cow, but he could also be a home run threat. He's going to play pretty early for the Aggies.
Yeah, look, they've been doing some work. That class, I think, on three's got him in the top 5. 24/7 has them just outside the top 5 at number 6. They did also just pick up Mike Brown. He's a 3-star, 4-star, depending on what service you're looking at. But he had an offer list from Texas to Oklahoma to Michigan, Ohio State, number 46 wide receiver in the country. These are always the guys, like, they're not the highly touted ones, but these are the guys that suddenly you look and it's a guy who plays the slot for 3 years and has, 600 yards a year. And you're like, oh, just a solid contributor. Those are guys you got to get into your recruiting classes.
Well, they've always done a lot of work right there in their area, East Texas, and in obviously Houston, where Brown's from. This is no different. They hadn't gotten many commitments from Penn State, then they get 2 in a row. So this is kind of coming back home. They went and got some Cali kids and all that. But Brown can run. He's a kid that actually plays with Keyshawn Henderson, the big-time athlete / quarterback. He's just underappreciated because of Keyshawn. But this is a guy that can play at the SEC level too. He's really shifty. He's got good hands. He'll play at a pretty high level. I'd imagine probably more than one spot. I think he could play slot or outside. I don't think there's anything wrong with him. I don't know why he's ranked 3-star. A little surprised by that, but rankings aside, he can play. So A&M is just improving the recruiting class even more. And I think they're probably pretty much a lock now for top 10 status. And like you said, they got a chance at a top 5 class.
Yeah, and getting back to in-state too, I had some Aggie friends text me a few weeks ago, like, why were we recruiting California so heavy? It's like,
it is unusual. It is unusual.
Get back to in-state. How about Ole Miss? They go and get a running back named Michael James from Montgomery area, Pike Road. There in Alabama. 3-star running back commits to Ole Miss, number 35 running back in this class. It's kind of been last year was a revolving door at running back, it felt like, for Ole Miss. They really got to get back to just filling that room with some guys.
Yeah, Jermichael Jones is a player from Pike Road. It's a program just outside of Montgomery that's very well known. It's also where Quinshon Judkins is from, ironically, that went to Ole Miss before he transferred to Ohio State. And this is a program that's always got everybody circling him. So he's used to going against good competition, and it means something to play there. I'll be curious to see how quickly he can impact Ole Miss, because you said it. That's probably the spot surprisingly, that they're a little bit behind. I mean, at one point, didn't they move a receiver to running back last year at Ole Miss? It was unusual for the whole team the way that kind of went down. But this is a traditional running back between the tackles guy, but he catches the ball and he can be used as a 3-down player. So anybody that plays for Kiffin's probably going to have to catch, and Jones can certainly do that.
One more here, South Carolina eyeing a big-time O-line recruit, number 1 prospect in their state, number 3 interior O-line prospect, Zyon Guiles, I think is how you'd say it. But that's certainly an area that Shane Beamer and company have improved in the last year or so in the trenches, offensive and defensive line. They had to get better on that offensive line from 2 years ago. Spencer Rattler was running for his life. They were much better. They were much better on the offensive line last year for Lenora Stellars, and it looks like they get even better with this kid in the fold.
Yeah, I had a chance to see him at a 5-on-5 tournament a couple of months ago, and he's just starting to understand O-line. He's probably as good or not better at defensive end right now, and he's about 300 pounds. Very unique athlete at that size. I asked him to put his arms out, and I'm like, I had to back up to get him in the photo. Like, that's how wide he is with his length. So maybe he could play tackle once he learns the craft, but worst case scenario, he's an interior offensive lineman with extreme athleticism, and he could get a shot at defensive line too. Zion's a great kid and just a freaky athlete.
One more here before we move on. I've had some Texas friends asking what's going on with us right now. Texas in with the number 37 class on 24/7 Sports. Only 3 kids in the group right now. Of course, they've had the quarterback. Is it Diabell?
Yeah.
And then they've got Chris Stewart, the wide receiver from Texas, and then Max Wright, the offensive lineman. But are you a little surprised that Steve Sarkisian, as good as they've recruited, I mean, they just signed the number 1 class in 2025, but 2026, only 3 kids in that group. All the other schools in the SEC seem to be doing work there.
Part of it is a little bit of staff change, and I think the other part is, remember now, he worked under Pete Carroll and he worked under Saban. They both hunted the big fish, and those guys oftentimes take longer to reel in. Let's see where they are in late October, early November. My guess is, because Saban, some of his classes started this way too, 3, 4, 5 guys committed. They're not in the top 20. But then at the end of June, you're like, oh, they've got 13 commitments and they got 3 5-stars. The kids they're going after are going to make decisions a little later because they can. That's all it is. The elite players in the state of Texas, how many of them are they not in on that they want to be? Hardly any. I'm not worried at all about where the Longhorns sit. They're going to have a top 5 team this year. They got Arch Manning leading that, what's going to be a circus, I'm guessing. I'm sure you're already aware of that based on where you live, but they're not going to have any hard time at all getting a top 10 class. And if they're outside the top 5, I'd be surprised at the end. It's still Texas. It's not hard to recruit there, and they've got a staff that knows what they're doing. They'll be fine.
All right, we'll touch on some kids who've made their decision. What about some kids up in the air? We'll talk about that next with Brian Smith. More with Brian Smith in just a second, but first, the Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. And each week, our Locked On College basketball experts are going to pick one team that stands apart, from top-seeded stars to the unexpected upsets. These guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. And this week's Armada and clear-cut Team of the Week, the Arkansas Razorbacks. Despite losing their first 5 SEC games of the year, Coach Cal's Hogs fought their way through the most rugged conference in college basketball to not only make the NCAA tournament, but knock off back-to-back national champion and Hall of Fame coaches en route to the Sweet 16. They accomplished all this without their second leading scorer, Boogie Flan. For most of SEC play, he was out, and without their leading scorer, rebounder, Adu Thiero, so far in the NCAA tournament. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they said go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what the Arkansas Razorbacks have done. It's clear our Team of the Week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Continue on here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out. And hey, for your second listen, you can check out Brian Smith and what he's got going on with Locked On the Portal. Brian, touching on some kids that are up in the air. 4-star interior offensive lineman Brandon Anderson listed his list of schools and on Monday, and 5 SEC schools in the mix: Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Mizzou, and Tennessee. 6'5", 335 pounds. This is what everybody's looking for in an lineman, and sounds like he is considering 5 schools from the SEC at this point.
Yeah, I saw him at a 5-on-5 tournament just over a week ago. That is a big guy, and he's really nice off the field, but when he put hands on people, it didn't go so well for those folks. Massive. He is the definition of an interior offensive lineman that you would expect to see at a Southeastern Conference football program. Committed to Tennessee, but then everybody really started coming after him. He lives just outside Atlanta, goes North Cobb, prominent program. I don't know where he's going to go, because I asked him, I said, is Tennessee or is it, what's going on? He goes, that's 50-50. I'm going to take some visits. We're going to see. Georgia and Bama are the ones that I kind of think are the most likely if it's not Tennessee. But if he takes all 5 trips, anything can happen. Great kid, but we got a little ways to go. That one could crawl into the fall. It wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, this one just seems like a kid. You get him, you're plugging him in on your offensive line maybe from day one, and you don't have to worry about that spot for the next 3 years. So certainly could be interesting to track his recruiting. I saw a 4-star D lineman, Elijah Golden, going to be visiting Alabama. What do you know about Golden?
Yeah, he just took his trip for a junior day. He's going to probably take an OV there. He's from Cardinal Mooney in Sarasota. He was at IMG at one point. Kid originally from the state of Virginia, and we've had him penciled for a long time. He's one of those kids that was on the radar like as a freshman, ends up at IMG and then transferred. 6'4", 255. He wrestles. He's super athletic. The only question is Elijah going to play inside or outside? That's to be determined. Florida, Bama, Notre Dame, schools all over the country are after him. Virginia Tech's in the mix. But I think that Bama is the school to kind of watch now. He took that first visit to the Capstone, and he liked it quite a bit. Let's see when he takes his OB there. That could be the sleeper in this race.
The big one that I've had several Georgia buddies texting about already. 5-star quarterback Jared Curtis. Seems to be a 2-horse race between Oregon and Georgia. And I believe he said a date coming up first week of May, I want to say. He's going to make his official announcement. Yeah. Where are we with Jared Curtis right now?
This is a situation where I thought it was going to end a little quicker, because he took not 1, but 2 consecutive 4-day visits. Went to Georgia, went to Oregon. I don't know how it's going to go, but he's going to wait it out till May 5th. Nobody seems to have the intel where he's leading. Everybody's guessing, but he's not saying anything. But both teams are putting a lot into it. Here's the interesting thing. Oregon's quarterback room's in a better spot than Georgia's right now. It's not really that close. If Kirby and company miss on this one, who do they go to? You mentioned Diabell a little bit ago. They've been trying to get in on him. Jaden O'Neal, a kid that's been committed to Oklahoma. There's a possibility with him and a few other guys, Landon Duckworth. But Georgia needs Curtis probably more than Oregon does. So I'm curious to see if they can get him. I just don't know where he's going. And I'm not sure Jared knows either at this point.
What about a kid that, he's got to be an all-time namer for me. I know his first name is Ethan, but he goes by Booby Feaster.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know.
What's the latest on Booby Feaster?
This is a ridiculous amount of riches, potentially. I ran across this by accident today. He's actually a class of 27 kid that reclassed to 26. He's a top 10 kid in 27, the number 1 receiver. Guess which school, who we already talked about today with receivers, he set an OV to? LSU. I'm like, are you kidding me? So, and he plays at DeSoto. It's one of the prominent programs on the south side of Dallas. Elite route runner. He looks like he's 20 years old already, and I'm not sure if he has his license yet, but whatever. He's just very, very aggressive with training and everything. We knew about him in like 7th, 8th grade. He was already making a name for it, playing up and all that stuff. He could go wherever he wants to go. Doesn't matter, Texas, LSU, Oregon, whatever. but that's a kid that'll probably make his decision later this summer after he takes 5 visits.
Last one for you, Brian, and appreciate your time and your expertise. What's the latest on Faison Brandon? I know he's committed to Tennessee, but I've had several people telling me that North Carolina is very much in his ear. Some other schools are in his ear. Does it still sound like he's pretty sound, confirmed to Tennessee? Of course, he's from the Greensboro, North Carolina area, so if Bill Belichick calls, you probably take that phone call. But I just mentioned it because he's the number 1 kid in this class currently.
Yeah, if you're the state school anywhere, it doesn't have to be Carolina, but the local kids are probably going to take that call. And you just brought up, like, Bill calls you, how do you not? The problem is he's been committed to Tennessee for about a year. So I really don't know how you do this, but at some point I imagine he'll visit North Carolina just to satisfy the political side of it. To that point, Faison Brandon is one of the nicest kids you'd ever meet. Very respectful. He doesn't want to tick off anybody, but there's no way to win this battle because if he visits UNC or anywhere else, Tennessee ain't going to like that very much because he's the face of their program. And if they lost out on him and Jared Curtis, they don't get either, who's from their state. That wouldn't look very good on the staff. So this is intriguing. I've heard that too, that Carolina was going to go after him. And I would think outside of borderline needing a restraining order, you're going to see Bill Belichick go out. You have to recruit him. You have to. What's their win total, like 7 or something? That's not, for what they're paying Bill, 7's not getting it done. I can assure you that. So I think they're going to do everything they can to get him on campus. It's one to monitor, but he picked Tennessee really early because he had a great relationship with the staff. So until otherwise proven, I think Faison Brandon will end up at Tennessee. I just don't know if it's going to be a straight path to Knoxville. There might be a trip or 2 involved.
Well, and the interesting part is you look at Josh Heupel's track record with quarterbacks has been pretty strong from his time at Oklahoma to UCF with Mackenzie Milton. And then, of course, got the most out of Hendon Hooker. And, Joe Milton was probably a miss, but now he's getting Nico Iamaleava, getting the best out of him. So I don't know. Belichick, that Brady guy was obviously awesome, but outside of Tom Brady, what other quarterbacks has Bill Belichick developed? So I'm just saying, like, track record, maybe sticking with Heupel might be the better path to getting yourself prepared for the next level is all I'm saying.
If I was a defensive end, I'd look at Bill a little different.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Linebackers. Yeah, sure. Definitely look at North Carolina. He is Brian Smith. Brian, always appreciate the time, man. Let everybody know where they can find your stuff.
Sure. The Locked On, the Portal podcast from the Locked On Network covers recruiting, NIL, transfer portal each and every day. Do rankings, talk about all the breaking news with commitments. Again, the Portal podcast is where you can get your daily recruiting news. Look forward to having you over.
Awesome. Great stuff, Brian. We'll do it again soon. More to come here on Locked On SEC. Hey, you can get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades Supply House. Whether you're into plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands, you're going to find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. If you need help with an order, Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals already take advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's over at supplyhouse.com.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, along here, Locked On SEC, part of Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And look, we talk mostly college football recruiting in the first two segments of today's show. Appreciate Brian Smith for joining us, but we got some basketball news before we get out of here. And yeah, there's been a lot of basketball talk. If you missed our Monday show, broke down all the tournaments, SEC making history with 7 SEC teams making the Sweet 16, most of any conference ever. History is made. Awesomeness is abound. But let's get to some news and notes before we call it a show. And over at Texas, they are making it official as the school announced Sunday that it fired Rodney Terry. Of course, multiple reports were out that the Longhorns were going to hire Xavier's Sean Miller. Well, on Monday evening, Texas men's basketball tweeted out, "Welcome to the 40 acres, Sean Miller," with a picture of Sean Miller in the photoshopped into the orange and white. Even there was a statement put out by Chris Conte from the University of Texas said, "I'm so excited about the future of our men's basketball program. Thrilled to add another phenomenal coach to our Longhorn family. When we were considering our next head coach, Sean Miller was a name that immediately came up as a perfect fit for us. He's long been known as an exceptional program builder, tremendous developer of players with a highly respected basketball coaching mind, and the future is bright. Can't wait to get him here with our elite group of head coaches." And that was something I kept bringing up during this whole process, that Texas prides themselves on having the best. If you've ever met a Texas booster or a Texas alum, they like fancy things. They like the finest things. They're a lot of big Texas alums running the country club circles. They like to have the best of the best. And when you look around their athletic department, I've talked about it, their swimming and diving team is winning championships, track and field, always great, tennis, great. Women's basketball, look at what Vic Schaefer's doing. They won yesterday. Look at what football's doing. Steve Sarkisian, back-to-back playoff appearances, college football playoff appearances, hoping to try to take the next step. You got Arch Manning on campus. The one, Jim Schlossnagle at baseball, they just took 2 out of 3 against LSU last weekend. The one sport that was lacking is basketball, and they were recruiting very well. They just brought in Trey Johnson, who was a top recruit. He's going to be a top pick, one of the top picks in this upcoming NBA draft, but they weren't able to get over that hump with Rodney Terry. And so now they get a very sexy name in the world of college basketball, and that is in Sean Miller. So sounds like they'll have a press conference today to introduce him. And again, best of luck to Texas. Again, the SEC was already tough, and now it gets even tougher. Over at Auburn, Bruce Pearl talking about the SEC getting in a record number of teams and some early upsets. People on social media were saying maybe the SEC is overrated because Texas lost to Xavier, ironically to Sean Miller. And they had some other early round matchups, Mizzou lost to Drake, I believe, and things like that. Well, on Monday, Bruce Pearl was on the Colin Cowherd show and talked about the intensity level of the SEC and said, look, everybody in the SEC is invested. It just means more. And I said this at the beginning of the season, and we're out there recruiting and competing. What was going to make the SEC really special this year and really deep and difficult to win is that the teams at the bottom of our league are investing very similarly to the teams in the middle and the top. There's just not much difference there. As for the number of teams in the SEC, Bruce Pearl said, I'm happy the SEC got 7 teams in. Not that it needed to validate what we did in the regular season, because what we did in the regular season was real. We earned the teams that we got, but I'm glad this many teams advanced. That way we don't have to put up with the argument that the SEC was overrated. I'm with you, Bruce Pearl. SEC not overrated. Just making history, setting records, 7 teams into the Sweet 16. How about over at Ole Miss? If you missed it last week, a guy by the name of Tim Doyle of CBS Sports called Ole Miss frauds in his tournament breakdown, saying, he wasn't rolling with them, that he thinks they're overrated and they were frauds. Well, Tim Doyle has since apologized for that comment. He, like I said, upset Rebel fans everywhere with his take on Chris Beard's team. Predicted that either 11 seed North Carolina or San Diego State would beat Ole Miss in the round of 64. And that became a hot take into a very cold take. And here's what Tim Doyle said. He said, he placed a card in front of him that said, I'm dumb, written on the pocket square. It said 91 points against Iowa State. I could never have dreamed a tournament performance like that. Sean Padula was outstanding. He had help, 6 Ole Miss players in double figures. It's an Iowa State team I thought could play defense. It's an Iowa State team I thought could control Ole Miss. Not so much. I was wrong, and I will say I am dumb and I am a fraud. Said I'm in the business of giving opinions, and my opinion stunk, and I was wrong. So how about that coming from Tim Doyle there at CBS Sports. All right, a few other nuggets here in the basketball world. Over at South Carolina, former Alabama big man Nick Pringle spent this past season at South Carolina. He is back into the transfer portal and will also perhaps test the NBA draft waters. Averaged 9.6 rebounds per game this year at South Carolina. Started his career at Wofford, spent 2 seasons at Alabama, and then went to South Carolina this past offseason. So we'll see where he ends up. Over at Florida, Todd Golden, his coaching tree continued to grow. Columbia announced Monday that Florida assistant Kevin Hovde, he has accepted the head coaching job there at Columbia. Fellow Gator assistant John Andrzejek, he recently accepted the coaching job at Campbell. So look, you do a good job, you're going to lose some of your top assistants. That just goes with the territory. And one more thing before we get out of here, did want to mention the in the women's tournament, some teams locking up their positioning as LSU and Kelmulkey. They knocked off Florida State yesterday, 101-71. So they move on to the next round in the Sweet 16 to play NC State. We could potentially get, if LSU beats NC State and Ole Miss could pull off the upset of UCLA, we could have an LSU-Ole Miss rematch in the Elite Eight. So that one will be interesting to watch. Of course, the Texas women, they beat Illinois yesterday. So we get an SEC rematch of Texas versus Tennessee in the Sweet 16. That one will be a lot of fun to watch as well. And there you have it. That's the latest going on around the conference. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. March is here. So be the most informed college basketball fan throughout the madness. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Come on back tomorrow as we'll be talking all things SEC, football, basketball, and much, much more right here on Locked On SEC.